Hello everyone, I am Siddharthan. In this video, we are going to discuss about the basic data types in Python. Actually, I have made a video on this topic already, but there was some lag in that video, so I am recording this again. In case you have watched that video already, you can skip this one. With that being said, let's get started with today's video. And as you might know, in this YouTube channel, I'm making a hands-on machine learning course with Python. And the second module of this course is Python Basics for Machine Learning, and this is the third video in this second module. So let's get started with today's video. So I'll be doing my Python programs in Google Collaboratory. I have already made a video on how you can access Google Collaboratory, so you can check that out. So let's get started. So these are the 5 data types in Python. Okay, so they are integer, floating point, complex, Boolean, and string. So these are the basic data types. We know that integer is a real number, right? So integer are numerical values, and floating points are decimal numbers. And we know that complex number is something that has both real number and an imaginary number. And Boolean is nothing but true or false values. So it contains only two type of values. One is true and the other one is false. And string is nothing but text or statements. Okay, so these are the 5 basic data types in Python. Apart from these basic data types, we have other complex data types such as list, tuples, etc. So we will discuss about that in a later video. So these are the basic ones. So let's get started and let's try to understand each of these basic data types. First, let's discuss about integers. So in Python, you can write commands using this hash symbol. Okay, so I'll make a comment here as integers. Okay, so integers, I'm going to create a variable as a. Okay, so in the previous video with index 2.2, I have explained what is meant by variables. So we are just declaring a variable here as a, and a is equal to 8. And now let's try to print this a. We know that 8 is a integer, right? So let's print a. So in order to run the cell, you can press shift plus enter. So it will execute the cell and go to the next one. So you can see here, we have printed a and it has printed 8 because we have given the value for a as 8. We know that 8 is an integer, right? So let's say that in some cases, you are not sure what is the data type of a particular variable. In that case, you can use the keyword type. Okay, so type is a keyword in Python which tells you the data type of a particular value. Here, let's mention a in this parenthesis. So this will return what is the data type of a. Okay, so let's run this, press shift plus enter. Okay, here you can see here int, which means int. So int represent integer values, right? So this is how you can print integers value. So you can give integer value to a variable and you can print it. Now let's discuss about floating points. So I'll make a comment here as floating point, and let's take the variable as b, and let's give a value like 2.3. So we know that 2.3 is a decimal value, so we know that floating points are nothing but decimal values. And now let's try to print this b, and let's also try to find the data type of b. So type b. Okay, so let's run this. So you can see here 2.3. So we have printed b whose value is 2.3, and we have found the data type of b as float. Okay, so short form for integer is int, and for floating point it's float. Now let's discuss about the third data type, which is complex numbers. So complex numbers. So we know that complex numbers has both a real term and imaginary term. So let's name this variable as c, and I'll give a complex number as 1 plus 3j. Here 1 is the real term and j is the imaginary term. So j square will be equal to -1. So that is meant by complex number, where we can also use I. So I or j is square of this j is equal to -1. That is the imaginary part, and you can print c. Okay, so let's also try to print the data type of c. Okay, so this prints the complex number, which is 1 plus 3j, and also it prints the data type of c, which is complex. So these are the first 3 basic data types in Python. As we have discussed about these 3 data types, there is another interesting thing that we can do. We can convert one data type to another. Okay, so I'll mention a text here as conversion of one data type to another. So here I'm going to convert 2 data types. So let's try to convert an integer into a floating point, and let's convert a floating point into an integer. So this will be integer to float. So let's name the variable as, okay, so I'll give some other variable name which is x. So let's say that x is equal to 10, and let's try to print x first, and let's also try to print the type of x, the data type of x. So I'll run this. Okay, so you can see here we have printed x. The value of x is 10 and it is an integer. Now let's try to convert this to a floating point. So let's name this variable as y, and to convert integer into a floating point, we need to mention the keyword float, and inside this parenthesis mention the term which you want to convert. Here x is an integer, right? And let's convert this x into a floating point, so you need to put x in this parenthesis. So this will convert, okay, one second. So this will convert x to a floating point value, and that floating point will be stored to y. And let's try to print both y and the data type of y. So type y. Here you can see here now we get the value as 10.0. So we know that 10 is an integer and 10.0 is a floating point or decimal value, and we have successfully converted this integer value using this keyword float, and we have tried to print the data type of y, and it has printed float. So this is how you can convert an integer to a floating point value. Now let's see how we can convert a floating point value to integer. Okay, so float to int, and I'll take the variable as x as x. In this case, let's give some random floating point value 5.88, and let's print x and also the data type of x. So type x. So the value of x is 5.88, and the data type is float. Now let's see how we can convert this. So y is equal to, so previously we have used this keyword float, right? In this case we are going to use the keyword int, which will convert the value to an integer value. So now mention x in this parenthesis. Okay, so x, and once we have converted it, let's try to print y and also the data type of y. So we can see here this 5.88 decimal value is now converted to an integer value which is 5, and we have found the data type as integer. So that is one main thing which you need to take note of in this case. So when you convert this floating point into an integer value, it doesn't round the value. It doesn't convert this 5.88 to 6. It just removes this decimal values, and it will give only this integer value. So this 5.88 won't be converted into 6, but this this 0.88 will be removed and we will get only 5. Okay, so this is what happens when you convert a floating point to an integer. Now we have the fourth data type, which is Boolean, right? So here I'll just mention a text as Boolean. So as I have told you earlier, Boolean has two values. One is true and the second one is false. So I'll mention it here, true and false. Okay, now let's create the variable as a, and let's put a is equal to true. So this is a Boolean value. Okay, so there is another main thing here. So this t should be in uppercase letters, so it shouldn't be in lowercase letters, so this will give us an error. So this is a predefined value, so it should be as such it is in this case. So the t should be in uppercase letter, and let's try to print this a now. So print a, and let's try to print the data type of a as well. So type of a, sorry, so type of a. So this a is printed as true, and we got the data type as bool. So bool represents a Boolean. Okay, so let's create another variable as b, and b is equal to false, and let's print b. Now also the data type of b. So you can see here. So this is how you can assign a Boolean value to a variable, and you can print it and find the data type of it. And the final thing which we have is string, right? So before that, let's discuss one more thing about Boolean. So let's see where we can use these Booleans. So I'll create a variable as a, and let's say that a is equal to 8 is let's say that 7 is less than 3. So we are just checking whether 7 is less than 3. So you know that 7 is not less than 3. So this statement is actually a false one, right? So this will return a Boolean value when you just compare two values. So here we are checking whether it is less than 3. So we are checking whether 7 is less than 3. When you run these kind of codes, it will return a Boolean value. Now you can try to print A. Okay, so let's also try to print the data type of A. Okay, sorry. So P shouldn't be in uppercase letter. Okay, so you can see here 7 is not less than 3, so it will give a Boolean value which is false. And we have tried to print the value of A which is false, and we have also tried to find the data type of A. So similarly, I'll just copy this and let's change this symbol. Okay, so let's say that 7 is greater than 3 and this condition is true, right? So let's call this as a condition. So let's check whether this condition is true. Of course, 7 is greater than 3, so this will return the value as true. So let's see. So yes, so true, and it is a Boolean value. So we use these kind of conditions in loops and in the case of if statements, etc. So in that cases, we will get a Boolean value. So this is one main application of Boolean data type. And the final data type which we are going to discuss is string. So strings are nothing but text and statements, and let's try to print some statements. So I'll print machine learning. Okay. So machine learning is a string. So these two words represents a string, and let's try to print this. So this will print you this string. The main thing about a string is the strings should be enclosed in quotes. Okay, so here I have used double quotes, right? So instead you can also use single quotes. So I'll just copy and paste this here and replace this double quotes with a single quote, and I'll run this will give you the same result. Okay, so the main thing here is if you start with single quote, it should end in single quotes as well. If you start in double quotes, it should end in double quotes as well. So the quotes shouldn't change, but you can use either double quotes or single quotes. So let's discuss some basic operations in strings that we can use. So I'll give a variable name here as my string. Okay, so let's say that my string is equal to, so as I've told you earlier, strings should always be enclosed in quotes, whereas we don't have to enclose, values, this integer values and floating point values in quotes. So only the strings should be enclosed in quotes. And here Boolean is a different data type. Hence we don't enclose it in quotes. Only the strings should be enclosed in quotes, either single quotes or double quotes. And I'll give the value as the same machine learning. And I'll print this my string. Here we have created the variable as my string, and I'm printing it. And let's try to find the data type using the type keyword, this type function. So my string. So let's run this. Now you can see here our string, which is machine learning, has been printed, and we found the data type as string. So str represents string. And let's try another thing. Print hello and 5. Okay, so I'm using this symbol here, this star symbol. Let's see what happens. We know that this represents multiplication symbol in Python, right? So when you use this line of code and let's try to print this, what happens here is your string will be printed 5 times if you mention 5. So if you mention 4, your string will be repeated 4 times. So this is how you can replicate your string using this line. Okay, so now let's see how we can slice a string. Mm, this process is called as slicing. I'll just make a text here as slicing. Okay, let's create a new string as, let's name this variable as my string, and let's give the value as programming. So this word programming has totally 11 letters. Okay, and I'm going to slice this string. Slice means getting only a particular portion of this string, this particular word. So let's print my string, but I don't want to print the entire thing. I just want to print a part of this word, and you can mention the values such as 1 is to 5. Okay, so let's understand indexing in Python. So indexing or the numbering in Python starts with 0. So the index of this first letter P is 0, and the index of the second letter R is 1 and 2 and so on. So P will be 0, R will be 1, O will be 2, and so on. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and it goes on. And we can mention the letters based on their index. So 1 means the second letter R, right? Because the indexing starts with 0, and 1 represents this second letter, which is R. And I want to print all the words from the first index R to the fifth index 5. Let's see which is the fifth index. So P is the 0th one. So R, O, G, R, A. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So A is the index 5. So when you use this particular line 1 is to 5, the values from this first index 1 will be printed all the way to this fifth index. But this fifth letter won't be printed. This fifth index value, which is A, won't be printed. So let's run this and try to understand this. Okay, so we got the values as ROGR. So this first index value will be printed, which is R, and this second index value 5 won't be printed. So you will get the values from ROGR. So this second index value will be neglected. So this is how you can slice a string. So the main thing to note here is the first value up to the last value minus 1. So here the values will be printed. So I'll just make a note here. So the values from index 1 to 5 minus 1. So 5 minus 1 is 4, right? So will be sliced. Will be sliced. So in every indexing cases, so this second index won't be included. So that is what you need to take note of in this case. And there is another process called a step. So we can also slice the words having a step value. Here let's print my string, and my string I'll mention 0 to 10. Let's take a step as 2. So I'm going to print from a 0. So the 0th index is P, right? All the way up to 10th index. So 10th index is this N. So 10th index is N. And sorry, 1 second. So this is a 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So 10th index is G. Let's try to print this step. So what happens when you mention 2 here is, so P will be printed and R will be removed. O will be printed, G will be removed. So that means step of 2. That means every second letter will be skipped. Let's try to run this. Okay, so here you can see here the 10th index value is N. So as I have mentioned you here that the second index value won't be involved, or it won't be included in this slicing. So we will get the value from this 0 index to the index 9, and every second letter will be removed. Here when you take P as the 0th index, the second letter R will be removed, and we will get O, G will be removed, and R will be printed, and A will be removed, and so on. So this is how you can slice a string by mentioning the step which we want. Okay, so that is another thing which you can do with string called as string concatenation. String concatenation. So concatenating is nothing but joining two strings. So let's name this variable as word1. So let's give the value as word1 is equal to machine. So I'm mentioning single quotes here, and let's take the second value as word2. So word2 is equal to learning. Okay, now I'm going to create another word. So let's print this. So print word1 plus word2. So when you use this plus symbol, so these two words will be joined. So this process is called as string concatenation. So you can see here there is no space here, right? So you cannot get a space with when you mention this plus. So if you want to have a space, you can just mention a space here, and let's run this. So this will give a space between them. So this is how you can concatenate or join two strings. So these are some basic details of the data types in Python and basic operations on the data types that we can do. So I'll just give you a quick recap on what are the things we have done here. So we have discussed the first, the 5 basic data types in Python, which are integer, floating point, complex, Boolean, and string. We have tried to print. We try to give give a value of integer to a variable a, and we printed it, and we have also tried to find the data type of a, and then we have tried the same with a floating point value, and we have also tried to create a complex number, and then we have seen how we can convert one data type to another using their respective keyword. So in this case, we have used this float keyword to convert an integer value to float. Here we have used integer keyword to convert a floating point value to an integer, and we have discussed about the two Boolean values which are true and false. And we have seen how we can use these Boolean values in the case of conditions. And then we have discussed about strings and how you can replicate the strings, and how you can slice the string by mentioning their indexes, and how you can slice a string by mentioning a step value. And finally we have seen how you can concatenate two strings. So these are some basic details about the data types in Python, and the next video which you want to watch will be on the other data types, which are list, tuples, arrays, etc. Okay, so that's it for this video. I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.